Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 5, Karma Yoga, Action, Krishna Consciousness, text 27 to 28. Sparshan Kritva Bhayams Chakshus Chaivantare Bruvo Pranapano Samo Kritva Nasabyantara Charino Jitendriyamano Buddhir Muni Moksha Parayanaha Vigatecha Bayakrodo Yaksada Mukta Eva Saha Sparshan Kritva Vayams Chakshus Chaivantare Bruvo Pranapano Samo Kritva Nasabyantara Charino Jitendriyamano Buddhir Munir Moksha Parayanaha Vigatecha Bayakrodo Yaksada Mukteva Saha Lakshan Kritva Bhayams Shantantare Purvo Pranapano Samokritva Nasabyantara Charino Jitendriyamano Buddhir Muni Moksha Parayana Vigatecha Bayakrodo Yaksida Mukteva Saha Sparshan Kritva Bhayams Chakshus Chaivantare Bruvo Pranapano Samo Kritva Nasabyantara Charino Tendriyamano Buddhir Jenske. What is one? Jenska? Jenska. Chuchaivantare Bruvo Pranapano Samokritva Yasabyantara Charino Jitendriyamano Buddhir Muni Moksha Parayanaha Vigatecha Bayakrodo Yaksada Mukta Seva Saha Sparshan sense objects such as sound Kritva keeping Bahi external Bayan unnecessary Chakshu eyes Cha also Eva certainly Antare between Bruvo the eyebrows Prana apano up and down moving air Samo in suspension Kritva keeping Nasa abhyantara within the nostrils Charino. What language do you use instead of saying Charino, they use Charinao? Is that Bengali? Or is that Sanskrit? Actually, it should be Charinao. AU is now ow. But we pronounce it usually as O. Easier. It's easier to pronounce as always. Blowing. Yata, controlled. Indriya, senses. Manaha, mind. Buddhi, intelligence. Muni, the transcendentalist. Moksha, for liberation. Parayana, being so destined. Vigata, being discarded. Ichcha, wishes. Vaya, fear. Krodha, anger. Ya, one who. Sada, always. Mukta, liberated. Eva, certainly. Saha, he. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostril, thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. Not an easy state to get into. You can try. So everyone can try to keep your eyes and vision between your two eyebrows permanently. Can anyone do that? Can anyone see let's see. Can you see it between your two eyebrows? Difficult. And then you have to keep it like that forever. A little difficult. Purport. Being engaged in Krishna consciousness, one can immediately understand one's spiritual identity. And then one can understand the Supreme Lord by means of devotional service. When one is well situated in devotional service, one comes to the transcendental position, qualified to feel the presence of the Lord in the sphere of one's activity. This particular position is called liberation in the Supreme. After explaining the above principles of liberation in the Supreme, the Lord gives instruction to Arjuna as to how one can come to that position by the practice of the mysticism or yoga known as Ashtanga Yoga, which is divisible into an eightfold procedure called Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. In the 6th chapter, the subject of yoga is explicitly detailed, and at the end of the 5th, it is only preliminarily explained. One has to drive out the sense objects, such as sound, touch, form, and taste, and smell by the pratyahara process in yoga. And then keep the vision of the eyes between the two eyebrows and concentrate on the tip of the nose with half-closed lids. There is no benefit in closing the eyes altogether because there's every chance of falling asleep. Nor is there a benefit in opening the eyes completely because there is a habit of being attracted by sense objects. The breathing movement is restrained within the nostrils by neutralizing the up-moving and down-moving air within the body. By practice of such yoga, one is able to gain control over the senses, refrain from outward sense objects, and thus prepare oneself for liberation in the Supreme. This yoga process helps one become free from all kinds of fear and anger, and thus feel the presence of the Supersoul and the transcendental situation. In other words, Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of executing yoga principles. This will be thoroughly explained in the next chapter. Krishna conscious person, however, being always engaged in devotional service, does not risk losing his senses to some other engagement. This is a better way of controlling the senses than by Ashtanga Yoga. Sparshan kritva bhayirvayam chakshushchaivantara bhruvo pranapana samo kritva nasavyantara charino. Jitendriyamano buddhir muni moksha prayana vikache chabaya kroda yaksada mukta evasaha. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. The transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatundeve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskadyade Satarne. As stated at the beginning of this chapter, Sankhya Yoga Pritagbala Pravadanti Napandita Ekam Apyasita Samyag Ubaya Vidite Palam. That only the ignorant speak of karma yoga and devotional service as being different from the analytical study of the material world. That one who applies himself well to one of these processes achieves the results of both. So Krishna is repeating this at the end of this chapter, that there is a mechanical process by which you can make progress, and eventually, if you have enough thousands of years to spend, then you can actually reach perfection, maybe. But it's not an easy process. We can't even look at between our eyebrows. What to speak of staying like that for 10,000 years like Kardama Muni did. And the other problem is Sparshang kritva bayam chakshu chaivantara bruvo pranapana samo kritva nasabhyantara charino. There's also the process that one has to go through of yama, niyama, and for an ordinary person in the material world, even trying to be nonviolent, to be truthful, any of these preliminary qualities is rather difficult to achieve, especially in this age. There's no opportunity to go to a sacred place and to try to control the mind. And Prabhupada said, even those who are trying to control the mind by this process, often it's found that they just fall asleep. As we can see even in our classes, sometimes devotees fall asleep. And we're not even practicing for so many pranayama or something, which is even more difficult. Therefore, it's generally not recommended. Go through the process of yama, niyama, asana. Nowadays, the asana process has become very popular. Everyone is trying to twist their body. But actually, they're not trying to twist their body in order to reach Krishna. Generally, 90% of the people doing yoga are ladies trying to thin their body, and the connection they want is with some soulmate somewhere. They're not really looking for the Supreme. They want to lose a few pounds and get another kind of connection. So this asana, which has become really amazingly diverse, you have all kinds of so-called yoga. I don't even know what the names of the different yogas are. You have hot yoga, water yoga, you have Ashtanga yoga, you have Bikram yoga, you have this yoga, that yoga. And they're all doing more or less the same thing, trying to twist their body or stretch their body in some way that's really impressive so that they look like a pretzel, and somehow or another they get enlightenment. If you can put your leg over your neck, then you're closer to heaven. And people are actually doing it. Going to the number one sport that gives injuries, that produces injuries, is yoga. Because there's no other sport where people are actually, with their joints, manipulating their joints in such a way is that it's dangerous, actually. I'm sure something like football, the contact sports, American football especially, people get concussions. I don't know if they count those, bashing into each other all day long. But this, you're actually trying to get your limbs in a position they were never meant for. I mean, I practiced this for 40 years. I'm still alive, thing. Even I practice what's called handstand. You know, handstand, when you stand on your hand. But people are not meant to stand on their hands. It's not the way Krishna made us. So you really have to practice a lot. It takes, and if you can do it, then you consider, a very advanced personality. I mean, it's much easier walking on your feet than on your hands. But it's impressive. People are just trying to impress others that I'm actually special. And if one actually, in the Patanjali Sutra, there's only one sloka pertaining to asana. And that's asana should be sukha and it should be sthira. It should be comfortable and it should be stable so that one can practice pranayama. And indeed, if one properly practices pranayama, you'll probably forget about most of the problems that you think you have. The problem with pranayama is you can't practice it the whole day. And even if you did, what would you get out of it? You'd probably feel good, maybe. But after executing pranayama and becoming expert at it, then the result is you become a little detached from the sense objects. One actually feels like he's floating. But after becoming detached from the sense objects, then you begin the actual process of dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, to actually try to fix your meditation upon Krishna. But it's much easier to come to the temple and just see the Lord and his devotees in the temple. You don't have to go through the whole process. Just come here and develop a relationship with Krishna. Because even the yogis, if they actually can meditate on the conception of the Supersoul, and when their minds actually become pure, then they'll actually become aware of the Supersoul. At least here it says, feel his presence, because he's actually there. He's in everyone's heart. But after going through the whole process of Ashtanga Yoga, meditating on the Supersoul, unless one has the association of devotees, then one will think that one is the Supersoul, that I'm looking at myself in the mirror of my heart. I never knew I had 4 arms. I look a lot more beautiful than I thought. Maybe I can take a snapshot and send to my girlfriend, and she'll really appreciate me. No, actually one has to understand by the association of devotees that actually this personality that you're seeing is not you, is the person who's directing you, the Supersoul. That you're conscious, and you're conscious now of the Supersoul. And someone like Narada Muni, after 10,000 years of such practice, then he actually realized Krishna in Satya Yuga. But he was in the forest, in a completely pure atmosphere, with no distractions, and therefore he was able to achieve practice after 10,000 years. Valmiki after 60,000 years, and Vishwamrita only became a Brahmin after 180,000 years. We don't even know if we have another 8 years left. But Krishna is including this just so no one can accuse him of trying to avoid other possible processes. So Krishna includes everything in Bhagavad Gita, Ashtanga Yoga, Jnana Yoga. He gives an outline. And if you want to practice it, you can go and practice it and see what the result is. When Prabhupada was asked, by one attendee at one of his classes, can you tell us about Lord Buddha, about Buddhism? And Prabhupada's reply was, do you practice Buddhism? And he said, no. So Prabhupada said, go, if you want to find out about Buddhism, go practice Buddhism. Just like sometimes people want to know, can you give us a summary of Krishna consciousness? So Prabhupada said, it's like asking someone, can you tell us about quantum mechanics? Can you give us a summary? You want to find out about quantum mechanics, go to college, study physics for 4 years, then afterwards you can go to graduate school and study it, and maybe after another 4 or 5 years, you can begin to understand something about quantum mechanics. So Krishna consciousness, which is even more subtle, you expect to understand it in 5 minutes. Of course, you can say to people that the body's changing, but we're not changing. But we're here, and we're hearing the same thing after 20, 50 years, and we still don't understand it. So it's not such a simple thing. Simply, this Ashtanga Yoga process is given in summary here, but actually to understand the depth of the intricacies of it is not so easy. And even those who practice it, they often don't even understand all the intricacies, because you require someone who's actually self-realized, who's actually practiced it and can explain it in detail. One can read the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, and even that, which deals mostly with the dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. It doesn't, as I said, it doesn't go into yama, niyama, pranayama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara. It really begins with dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. But it's a sutra, and it can only be understood by a person who's actually practiced it. So otherwise, in this age, even if we wanted to do it, which no one really wants to do it, they want to do, it's good that they do exercises, because generally speaking, the exercises, most of what's being done, it comes from the YMCA. Do you know the YMCA? Yeah, that's where they got it from. It's actually calisthenics, because in the 1800s, people started to work in factories, and they weren't doing any physical labor anymore, as they used to. So they were getting sick. So the Christian organizations started this calisthenics and gym work, so that people could actually get a little healthier. They can digest the food. And there's another group of people from Sweden that were known as the contortionists. And they started to do all these unusual exercises with their limbs in order to make money. Freak shows, actually. So these personalities, they became famous. People, especially went to Europe, they were impressed. So one of them was, some of them came back and they introduced this system of calisthenics, and they called it yoga. It was taken up especially by some personalities, and they adopted some of the contortionist exercises and gave them Sanskrit names. And that's more or less what yoga is nowadays. It's a combination of calisthenics and contortionism. But it was been refined by some, and it's actually could be fairly good exercise, but it was never a spiritual process, what's being introduced nowadays. Pranayama, maybe, but people don't know the intricacy. Mostly pranayama, they don't practice for pratyahara, and certainly pratyahara they don't practice to meditate on the supersoul. They don't really know. the yoga that I studied for like 20 years was they were trying to become all-pervading in their body, their consciousness, which is pretty far away from the supersoul. And probably they're the most serious of all the different groups. Although the original source of most of the yoga nowadays, Krishna Namacharya, who was a devotee, Sri Vaishnava, and he was actually talked more about Paramatma. He spent most of his time chanting japa. And he just did a little exercise. But then he taught his followers different things, and one of them really got into the physical exercise part of it. So I'll stop there. Any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna. This purport, Prabhupada says that they become free from fear after practicing, after suspending their breath. So I was wondering, how does breath exercise help become free from fear and also from anger?
Well, fear is a product of bodily identification. And by practicing pranayama, you become gradually detached through the pranayama into pratyahara from the bodily identification. One becomes more conscious of the fact that one is a spiritual soul floating on these airs. Without realizing we're eternal, there's no question of being free from fear. But that helps you come to that platform. Yes. It's like people have out-of-body experiences. So they realize they're not their body. So similarly, pranayama will bring you to practicing an out-of-body experience. Yes. Is that it? Anything else? Yes.
Sometimes in the past, I had an experience of having some happy chanting and trying to really focus, and it seemed to some extent successful. Not only chanting, but mostly after chanting. But so some really happy experience. And then after that, I would be very irritable and almost easily angered, very easily angered. So would you like to comment on the mechanism of why after being...
Well, you're thinking one followed the other.
Pardon?
That you're thinking one caused the other, but not necessarily. Sometimes Krishna, because of our karma, therefore we're bound to get the reactions of our karma at some time. And that may lead us to things like being more irritable. So sometimes Krishna, out of his mercy, gives us a higher taste just to prepare us, so we don't get overly disturbed when we get into a period of karma, which is very unpleasant. We can remember the mercy Krishna gave us. That can carry us through it. All right, thank you very much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande Hari Bol.